You know, there's a YouTube video going kind of viral. It's getting a lot of press from a very beautiful young girl named Candace Owen, who has a YouTube series called The Myth of the Coon. And she's, if you can't watch because for some reason you're not a subscriber or something like that, she's an absolutely gorgeous girl, and she comes on and basically says, "You expect me to panic. Where's the panic really coming from?" Just listen to a little bit of this.
I mean, there are, 6,000 Klansmen left in our nation? You want me to actually process that as a legitimate fear every day when I wake up?
It's Donald Trump's fault that they're feeling energized. It's Obama's fault that Black Lives Matter is violent.
Both of you children, to your room. It's obviously the media's fault. I mean, the media is creating this entire narrative, and it is crazy, absolutely crazy to me that people have not figured this out yet. I mean, why do you think we didn't hear a single thing about David Duke, white supremacy, and the KKK the entire time Obama was in office? Do you think that they were all hiding underground, waiting for the next white president, meeting by the light of the moon? Do you really actually believe that they weren't still meeting, holding protests, having rallies and marches? Maybe the media wasn't covering it. Use your brain. I mean, the media is literally simulating a reality right now, and it is fascinating to watch people fall for it over and over again. Am I the only person in the world that relies on her own experiences to dictate what's going on in the world? I mean, maybe it's me. Maybe I live in a bubble where Black people and white people actually get along every day.
I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, that is exactly right. And I will prove it to you. I will prove to you that it is the source of all the panic, the source of all the tension, the source of everything that's going on. I mean, it is the media. I will prove it to you in just a minute. Let me prove to you that this is pure, everything that has happened over the last week is pure media entirely. And this is granting that Donald Trump says things that, sometimes go up my spine. It's granting that he shouldn't have said, "Oh, they're wonderfully fine people on both sides," even though I know what he meant was on both sides of the issue of statues. He doesn't have a feel for the fact that race has been a thorn in America's side. Okay, all that is fine. Here is the former president. What was his? I can't remember his name because his legacy is now just a steaming pile of nothingness.
Brammy or something.
Brammy. I think O'Brammy. Yeah, it was something. Jack O'Brammy. I think it was President Jack O'Brammy at the 2015 prayer breakfast. All right, I was at the prayer breakfast this year. I talked about it on the show afterwards, and it's this gathering together, this wonderful feeling, mostly Christian. There are obviously rabbis there, and there are a couple of Muslims and all this, but it's mostly a Christian feel. This is mostly still a Christian country. And so Obama gets up, and this is after his policies have led to the rise of ISIS. Now ISIS is going nuts, and they were just slaughtering people, right? Just atrocities like we haven't seen in a generation. Truly, truly terrible, terrible things these terrible, terrible people are doing. This is Obama's speech about this, okay? Here's just some excerpts.
We see ISIL, a brutal, vicious death cult that in the name of religion, carries out unspeakable acts of barbarism, terrorizing religious minorities like the Yazidis, subjecting women to rape as a weapon of war, and claiming the mantle of religious authority for such actions. And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ. So this is not unique to one group or one religion. There is a tendency in us, a sinful tendency that can pervert and distort our faith.
Now, let's compare this to what Donald Trump said at his press conference when he said there are nice people on both sides, blah, 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 both sides are to blame. First of all, Trump was correct, okay? He was correct in saying that both sides are to blame. The Antifa people are violent thugs if you include Black Lives Matter, if you include the false narrative that Michael Brown was killed unjustly, all the cops who were killed in Dallas, all the violent protests in Ferguson that burned the city to the ground, set that city back, all of these can be ascribed to left-wing violence, and also, of course, now they call them Antifa. They put the accent on the wrong syllable. It's Antifa now beating up people in Berkeley when they come to speak, attacking people, even at this Boston rally, which, like I said, was really well handled by the cops. The violence was left-wing violence. It was people tearing down flags, people attacking people if they had short haircuts. All right, what Obama said was wholly false, obviously. I mean, yes, there were atrocities committed by Western Christians during the Crusades and by Muslims during the Crusades, but the Crusades were largely a defensive war against the onslaught of Islam, which was trying to wipe Europe off the face of the map, as it had wiped Byzantine Rome off the face of the map, as it was had been enslaving people for decades and centuries, coming in and raiding villages and taking people away to be slaves. So that was nonsense. Slavery, there were people who justified slavery in the name of the Bible. There were also people, all the people who shut slavery down were religious people, Christian religious people. So it's just like fractured history that Obama is spewing up there at a moment when ISIS, not 150 years ago, not 1,000 years ago, right then, was slaughtering and raping people, as I say, like we haven't seen since the Nazis. Just absolutely an incredible statement. Okay, now here's my point. Conservatives said everything about Obama after that event that liberals are saying about Trump now. Okay, so there's no difference there. The things that were going on in conservative circles were exactly the same. We're just as outraged. It was outrageous. But the press, this enormous echo chamber, it was nothing to them. Here's just an example from the Washington Post. President Obama has never been one to go easy on America. As a new president, he dismissed the idea of American exceptionalism. America, he has suggested, has much to answer given its history in Latin America and the Middle East. His latest challenge came Thursday at the National Prayer Breakfast. At a time of global anxiety over Islamist terrorism, Obama noted pointedly that his fellow Christians, who make up a vast majority of Americans, should perhaps not be the ones to cast the first stone. Some Republicans were outraged, and that's the difference right there. It is not that we're facing a national crisis. This is some Republicans were outraged. And if CNN, if ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times said some Democrats were outraged by Donald Trump, then we could be having a conversation. But we're not having a conversation. We're having a panic. And I'm going to get back to this at the end of the show. When you think about what's happening in this country, the unemployment is virtually gone. Crime is still very low. Some of Obama's policies worsened it, and some of the left-wing policies in cities like Chicago and Baltimore have worsened it, but it's still really low from its height in the 70s and 80s and 90s and part of the 90s. It's really come down. Racism, I'm sorry, but except in random instances, in a country of so many, hundreds of millions of people, racism is not a problem in this country. Racism is not a problem. If anything, it's white people who suffer from it because of affirmative action type things, but I don't even believe that's a terrible, terrible problem. A real problem, the kind of problems that you have if you're in Sierra Leone at this moment or something like that. This country is so much angrier than the level of its dysfunction that the anger is a dysfunction in and of itself, some of which is, I have to put, at the door of the press, but some of which, of course, they couldn't get away with what they're getting away with if it weren't being generated from within us as well.